And so I watched you guys on the Modern Wisdom podcast. And so in that, if we're going back to futurism specifically, you guys talk about the fact that there needs to be more young people in futurism, um, which it almost sounds ironic that a lot of futurists are older, because it seems like, well, I don't want to put like a negative spin on this, but if like the older you are, the closer you are to dying, and that means that you're not in the future. So the younger
Yeah.
people are part of the future. So it's like climate change as well. That's why you've maybe got so many younger people fighting for climate change, because it's their future more than it
Yeah.
is older people. And that's also like the one thing I thought of when I was thinking about this was, is that maybe the same problem with our leaders? The fact that our leaders are so old that they're not thinking enough into the future, and that's maybe why their policies don't reflect that. Do you think that's maybe the case?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I mean, we see some, in Scotland, some young MSPs
Mhm.
coming in, but it's always the older ones that are dominating the conversation. And I think anyone over sort of 35 to 50 is where the majority of people sit, and you don't see those people coming in, early 20s. Um, and it would be great to see people who don't have that kind of formal education in politics to come in and have a conversation and have a representative say. Um, and I think that the other problem with most sort of politics and politicians and things is that it's always just a 4-year cycle.
Yeah.
I'll think about the next 4 years because that's what my term is, and I don't care what happens after that. If I get elected, oh Christ, I'll have to think about another 4 years. But if I don't get elected, someone else's problem.
Mhm.
And I'll make some money doing speaking gigs and stuff like that around the world because I was so famous. You
Yeah.
know, um, that's the unfortunate truth, I think. And of course, as a result of that kind of short termism, is that policies never stick. They change because someone else will come in and have their idea of what the next 4 years will look like. So we don't get proper continuity, and the younger generations don't get that representation either.
Yeah. I think that's like, I remember someone saying that if Obama was a dictator, we'd get so much more done because he would have so much time to do everything that he wanted to do, whether you agreed with him or not. He would get more of what he wanted to do done. And yeah, I think that's the problem with a lot of politics, is just that it's 4-year terms and not enough thinking into the future. But some form of change in politics to adapt to that would have to be radical, and no one likes radical change, and no one's talking about a revolution or anything like that because no one
Mm.
wants that. So the problem is, well, like that's maybe a cynical thing when you're talking about the future, is that things don't really change. They do, but in these cases, they don't.
Yeah.
Like the people in power, it's always going to be that way for a long time, or at least if we're thinking pessimistically, then it's going to be a long time.
Yeah, the other thing as well, and go back to the first point that Darren sort of made in terms of the pace of change is really fast, but also really slow. Um, Politicians are extremely technology ignorant, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
technologically ignorant. And I'm not saying it as a derogatory term. I just don't think they understand what's coming, which is why I guess we probably need more younger people in the frame here. But I remember seeing a report that basically said, I think, and it was mostly talking about Parliament, English Parliament rather than Scottish Parliament. But although, to be honest, it's probably reflective anyway. But the number of MPs who had a technology background was like single digits
Mm-hmm.
compared to the rest of them, and yet here we are in a world where technology is obviously is almost setting the pace and setting the tone of where the world is going. You have the technology leaders like Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, um, all basically telling us this is what the future looks like, and you have to come along for the ride. And the politicians are completely ignorant of that fact, or even how to understand how to challenge them. I mean, watching the Facebook conversations in Congress, for example, was just hilarious. And it's like, I
Mm.
can't believe that, we've got this guy who's Mark Zuckerberg, who has almost 3 billion people under his roof.
Mm.
Um, and he's being challenged by 50, 60-year-olds who have no idea what they're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
and that's quite scary when you think about it.